Lights on. Good afternoon, everyone. I am opening the June 21st Air Pollution Control Board meeting. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Director Wolf? Hartman?
Here.
Adam?
Here.
Sierra? Clark? Bennett?
Here.
Mosby?
Here.
Murillo?
Here.
Patino?
Here.
Richardson?
Here.
Williams?
Here.
Lavanino? And Lizalde.
Here.
Okay, and we do have a quorum.
Okay. Will everyone join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3, approval of the minutes. I will abstain.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None. One abstention. Okay. Moving on to administrative items. Is there any that the board would like to pull? I see
Down here.
one.
Yes. If I could get some more explanation on this wood smoke reduction program.
That is A6.
How's that all work? Yes, A6.
A6.
Okay, item
Okay.
A6 is the state-funded wood smoke reduction program. This is adopt a resolution resulting in the following actions. A, rescind District Board Resolution 17-04 that established the district's existing wood smoke reduction program with an effective rescind date of June 30th, 2018. B, establish a state-funded wood smoke reduction program and approve acceptance of funds to implement the program. C, authorize the control officer to sign a memorandum of understanding with the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, included as attachment 1 to the resolution. And D, authorize the control officer to sign installer agreements that are approved by council, auditor, and risk management, and which shall meet the program requirements established by the agreement between the California Air Resources Board and CAPCOA.
So this program will build off of our current project or program we had in place, which was incentive-based. It has a different funding source coming from the state. It's been allocated across all the air districts who are interested in participating, so we'll have a total of $250,000 that will be available. The incentives will be based on the removal of a wood stove and the replacement with the natural gas or electric or propane insert, and we'll be working through a network of dealers and installers throughout the county. The big difference here, and this is being implemented statewide, it's based on communities that are disadvantaged, or higher burden of pollution, lower income levels. There's a number of tools that are being used statewide to designate those areas. We're relying on the map AB 1550 that's based on census information that designates certain regions in Santa Barbara County as being low income. If individuals reside in those communities, they are eligible for a maximum of $5,000 for a replacement. There's also other ways to demonstrate low income, and it's in addition to homeowners, it's also available to individuals who own rentals. So if you are a property owner, you too can participate and receive up to $5,000 if the property resides in one of those regions. So it does not, our existing pilot project that we were operating went for a complete replacement. We provided a $500 incentive for people that just wanted to remove their fireplace or wood stove. And so that's no longer part of this program. It's not being implemented statewide. And it provides 2 levels of incentives, $1,000 for all regions of the county for the incentive, or up to $5,000. And another key difference is the contract or the relationship we'll have with all the local installers and distributors.
Is wood smoke a major component of our air quality issues?
Yeah, and we actually, because this is an issue that you brought up when we did the pilot project, and we included reference to the portion of particulate matter that we experience in our area primarily during the winter months. And I'm looking for that percentage right now, and it's not popping. Let me just see if I can find it, or I might need to ask my staff to come up and provide the percent allocation of wood smoke during the wintertime. And the significant impact to wood smoke is its neighborhood impact. So it occurs in a neighborhood where you have residents, elderly, and children, so those that are more sensitive to the effects of particulate matter. I can ask.
You know, I'm going to say something that is not a scientific statement, and I guess I don't. I think I just want to roll call vote on this one so I can vote against it. But you know, isn't it part of winter to smell fires a little bit? You know, I mean, isn't it part of life to smell the barbecue? I just can't imagine that it's a statistically significant portion of our, you know, it's not like diesel smoke or something. I mean, I get cleaning up diesel smoke, but it just seems like we're really deep in the weeds with a deal like this, so I'm opposed.
Any other comment from board? Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, one of my concerns.
I think it's on. Oh, okay.
Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Very good. Okay. One of the concerns I have is, and Mr. Adams just kind of passed on it, and that's barbecue smoke. I mean, that's, in my neighborhood, there's a lot of us that barbecue on a frequent basis, and I can just see the steps of this thing just going forward and continuing to move forward where you won't be able to barbecue anymore because somebody doesn't like the smoke or whatever. I don't know. It just seems that's really unfortunate if that were to occur. And I don't know how this might drive that, but I know that there's nobody using a fireplace in my neighborhood, but maybe for 1 or 2 months a year, and frequent even then. So, and I'll use myself as an example. I mean, I may use my fireplace 2 or 3 times a year, and that's about it. So I just wondered that question that was asked, how prevalent a problem is this, or is it limited to a certain segment in our community or a certain area or whatever? Because at least so far, I've never received any complaints.
The Air District does receive complaints regularly from wood smoke during the colder months of the year. And based on the emissions inventory that we have for the county, nearly 1/3 of the wintertime fine particulates, result from wood burning. And one thing to note, that this is a voluntary program, and not everyone has to take it who wants to maintain their fireplace. And just to put it in context of the success we've had so far, when we had a limited amount of money, we elected not to do a vast amount of outreach because we had such a small amount of money, but it did receive strong participation countywide.
Director Williams.
Well, Aaron made half the point I was going to make, which is this isn't the wood smoke police going to people's houses. This is a voluntary program, right? You know, this is if this is 1/3 of our air quality impact in winter months, it's significant. And we could go, well, you know, people have used wood smoke for a long time, but they haven't used wood smoke combined with huge diesel particulate emissions by living close to a freeway for many, many eons combined. And so we may not be able to reduce that other emission as easily. And this is, if it's successful, is a good, friendly way to reduce those emissions. I actually had a question too, which is, if we expect this to be highly subscribed, do you think that there would be any logic to preferencing the switch to electrification, which would have even fewer emissions than if they make the switch to natural gas? And this is more I mean, this is also partially the side issue in safety is that a lot of talk post Northern California fires and post debris flow here is, you know, maybe it's better to not have as much infrastructure in a neighborhood that blows up, and when we can rebuild now that our appliances are electric capable, rebuild and downplay or the usage of natural gas, which does create some emissions from leakage at the same time.
Mr. Adam, then Mr. Richardson will be next, I think, or Ms. Wolf. Okay.
Well, it was a question, though. I mean, have you guys thought about that?
We have not, and you know, we've been in conversations with CAPCOA statewide. It hasn't come up in that discussion. It's something we can definitely push forward if the board's interested in us doing so. I know that additional funding is being discussed currently with the legislature as far as demonstrating success that the local air districts are able to implement these funds. So what we see today is the first time that the state has awarded funding to air districts to implement this program, and depending on this success, it has a likelihood of continuing with funding.
I just think it was something we should look at, because I used to be a big fan of natural gas as a bridge fuel, but you look at because some of the age of the infrastructure, leakage rates are pretty heavy, and your mind might change if ever in your jurisdiction the stuff blows up. I definitely looked at it in the past 3 months a lot more critically after it blew up on the morning of the debris flow. It kind of makes you reevaluate those things. So it just might be I'm not going to make the good be, or the perfect be the enemy of the good today, but I just think it's something that CAPCOA should look at in the long run. It would be a better transition.
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
Well, all I want to say is it's voluntary until the mays become shalls, and then it's not voluntary anymore. And then you can't barbecue, which eliminates all of our lifestyle. I mean, that's part of the world here, so that's just sacrilege.
Director Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing that as I was reading through this, there's a section that talks about, well, first of all, they talked about stoves. They seemed to be focusing on indoor stoves, and then they mentioned that fireplaces might be included in this, but it says the replacement device must be a primary source of heat in the house. Mm-hmm. So whoever goes out and determines that someone might be eligible for this program, it seems then that they have to determine that the stove or even perhaps the fireplace is a primary source of heat. So I kind of look at it a little bit differently. To me, it feels like, although I could be totally off with this, but it seems like this program may not. I think of how many people depend on a fireplace or a wood-burning stove as their sole source of heat, and that maybe our own program was better than this because we were able to outreach to more people. This seems a little bit more limiting.
I could respond to that.
Thank you.
This has been a conversation within CAPCOA working with the California Air Resources Board, and this has been a tough issue for a lot of air districts. And it doesn't say the sole source, it's a primary source. And it's self-designated as far as if this is a primary source.
It must be a primary source.
Yeah, a primary source. So not the sole, but one of the primary is how it's being interpreted across air districts. And it will be on the shoulders of the applicants to make that designation with their application.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for addressing that. And I think the other, I think this is a good program. I did like our own, maybe a little bit better.
Yeah.
But and did ours also apply to renters? Because this one does.
You know, I'm not quite sure if our existing program.
No, our current program does not apply to renters.
Okay, so that's a benefit to this program, if I'm,
Mary, you need to get on the microphone.
Chair Lozada and board members, our current program does not apply to renters, and does the maximum is $1,000, where the maximum for the state program for low-income communities is $5,000. So there's quite a bit of difference there.
okay. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Director Patino.
Yes. You know, I just think that, you know, as Mr. Adams said, we talk about barbecues, we talk about wood smoke, we talk about our fireplaces, and I enjoy using my fireplace. I use it more than 2 or 3 times a year. But in Santa Maria, we have a nice wind that blows through, also that clears a lot of our air. But what starts out as voluntary in the next step, or the step after, will start off as mandatory. Much as up in Napa County, they're only allowed to burn wood maybe 2 times out of the whole year. I just think this is government's way of reaching in again in our lives and restricting what we do. Those are my comments. And I would like it pulled to vote on separately than the rest of the agenda.
I see no other comments. Director Bennett, sorry.
Thank you. I don't have a button to push so you can see it.
Yeah, right. Just raise your hand, that's fine.
My comment would be that I had a situation a number of years ago where I owned a home up in the mountains. Of course, it gets a little colder there, but I was without power for over a week. And if the fireplace hadn't been available, I can assure you that it would have been incredibly difficult, and I couldn't leave because I was snowed in. So, you know, these are circumstances we don't often think about in our area, but I will guarantee you when we have, and we keep being told we will have, a major earthquake on the San Andreas, depending upon what time of year that may occur, there's going to be some tremendous impacts. And there's a means to an end. And it just seems to me that I recognize it's all voluntary, and that I support, and I think that's great, as opposed to being mandated. But there's unintended consequences here that could have a real impact that we may not be thinking about in terms of how we take care of our populace if something were to occur. And that's not suggesting every house has a fireplace, because they don't. Many of the single-family dwellings do, but certainly rentals, for the most part, do not. So it has the potential to have some real impacts, and I just think we always need to be very careful of this. But as it is right now, the fact it's voluntary, I'll go along with it as long as it remains that way, but I'd have a very difficult time supporting it if it were to become mandated. Thank you.
Director Richards.
The question I have is this: a motion? The motion would be to effectively rescind the date of the current wood burning. If this is voted down, will the wood smoke program that we now have continue in effect?
No, that program's been allocated for the majority of all the funds that the board previously awarded to it. So there are no more incentive dollars available to expand on that program.
Thank you.
Okay. Director Williams.
I appreciate Director Bennett being willing to continue to support the motion, the item. I did want to give you a little bit of reassurance. I have a converted fireplace, and there's still, meaning it was converted to natural gas. I've never turned it on because I don't want the natural gas, but it still has effective venting. So in the cases of emergencies, you know, if we were cut off for weeks and we had a cold snap, it would still be capable of using as a fireplace. But the conversion, I think, is a pretty big disincentive, because most people don't want to then take a post-converted one, turn off their gas, because you can't run at the same time. That would be pretty dangerous, and do that. So, you know, I still think for emergency purposes, a lot of these post-conversions still could be used for emergency purposes.
Director Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's interesting how the conversation has kind of evolved on this issue, but I think it's important, and I think we all agree that this is voluntary, but it's also not taking away someone's wood-burning stove and saying, if people are worried that this might become a shall, that's not even what this is proposing. And I just want to go through the 4 options. So if someone has a wood-burning stove that is above a certain level and it's dangerous for people who are living in the home, this program is providing those people with an opportunity to have cleaner air inside their home. And so the replacement devices that are listed here, one is an EPA certified wood stove or wood insert. So for people who are concerned about wood, you can still have it, but it has to be presumably, and there's information here about the emission rates, a natural gas home heating device, a propane home heating device, or an electric home heating device. But I did want to point out that you still can have a wood-burning stove. And I think the fact that there is this money that's allocated for anyone, but it's focused on low-income families, I think is really important. And this is our opportunity to use the funds from the state to do something that we always talk about, which is the correlation between pollution and public health. And again, the issue of a shall is not in front of us today. It's a may, and I think it would be unfortunate if this board or commission or whatever we are, district, didn't approve something that we know could help people's health. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
And I'd like to move this item if there's no more comments or public comments.
I'll second it.
Before we set a motion, is there any public speakers on this item?
Yes, we do have one public speaker, Frank Peters.
Chair Zaldi, members of the board. My name is Frank Peters. I'm with the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition, and I'm a member of the Air Pollution Control District Hearing Board. I feel biking and briefings go well together. Coincidentally, today is my 1-year anniversary on the hearing board, and I was appointed to the board based on many years of advocating for clean air, especially as it relates to the adverse health effects from wood smoke. My wife and I lived on the beach in Newport Beach, which nobody would feel sorry for me, but we had 27 wood-burning firings in front of our house. And we ignored that for about 13 years, and then when we did some research, we were horrified with what we found. I'm the party responsible for handing this out. I've given the link to Aaron. This is a report, just came out today, so I didn't wake up thinking that I was going to come in here and celebrate my anniversary with you. But when I saw this report, I wanted to share it with you. It's from a group in Connecticut, a bunch of Yale health experts, environment and human health. And it's I think it's an 84-page report, so I pulled out just the good parts. This speaks to what county governments could do. So anyway, most people just don't know about the health effects from wood smoke, right? It's the very small particles. They enter the lungs. Your lungs protect you from so many other particles in the air, perhaps, but the very small particles in wood smoke can go right through the lung into your bloodstream, and many people believe it correlates with damage to the brain. In general, I think I could say that what we know is that young children are adversely affected by wood smoke, as well as senior citizens. I've read that the average onset of lung cancer is 70 years old. Now, for many of you, that sounds like a long way off, but not for me. So anyway, this, I think, What I wish you would think about is the economically disadvantaged homeowner, perhaps, that doesn't have a lot of choices on how they heat their home. And they may have small children that perhaps they have asthma, or we know it's doing damage to their health. And you're giving them an opportunity to take advantage of this money to improve the air quality in their home and in their neighborhood. Please vote to approve this issue.
Thank you. Okay, do I hear a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll move state staff's recommendations to adopt this item.
Second.
So a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Director Wolf?
Aye.
Hartman? Aye. Adams?
No.
Bennett?
Aye.
Mosby? Aye. Murillo?
Aye.
Patino?
No.
Richardson?
No.
Williams?
Aye.
And Lizalde?
No.
Okay, and the motion passes 6-4.
Okay, thank you. I have a request to pull A7. Read it, Madam Clerk, please. Read it up. Present that.
Item A7 is the voluntary NOx remediation measure funding. This is a request to approve a resolution resulting in the following actions. A, authorize the district's participation in the California Air Resources Board's voluntary NOx remediation measure funding program. And B, delegate authority to the Air Pollution Control Officer to enter into a grant agreement with CARB for the voluntary NOx remediation funding measure funding included as attachment 1 to the resolution.
Okay.
So it turns out that biodiesel was a bad idea?
It had an increase of NOx emissions associated with the biodiesel. And because of that, ARB had to go back with some corrective actions and provide more grant funding to reduce emissions from other projects statewide.
When did they find out that happened?
You know, they've seen an increase of NOx emissions with various feedstocks of biodiesel over the years, and this was something that recently ARB did in their study just within the last year, where they came out with this settlement agreement.
Well, this is a rhetorical question, and you may not have an answer for it, which is totally forgivable. But what else are they wrong about?
Well, they do know that biodiesel, when you use biodiesel, the exhaust has less toxic air contaminants in it. So that's, I think, one of the main benefits of moving forward with the use of that type of fuel. There's just, unfortunately, this downside of an increase of NOx emissions.
Okay. Thanks.
Director Williams. Then Director.
Well, and I'll just, for history's sake, in my experience, in 6 years I was in the legislature, CARB has not been all, pro biodiesel. They have been pushing electrification, and I would say that the legislature, in a slightly different but similar, has not been pro biodiesel, but has been pushing either electrification or the use of the new Cummins engine, natural gas engine for freight, which could also revolutionize and reduce overall emissions on the road. So I don't think everybody was all in love with biodiesel. Here locally in the South Coast, a lot of us may have been overly rosy about biodiesel, and some jurisdictions have used it, but I think there's multiple strategies that can and should be entertained, and electrification and natural gas is part of it too.
Director Bennett.
My comment would be to the officer. What impact? My understanding is there's a big push in the federal government right now to increase the percentage from 10% to 15%. And if that were to occur, how would that exacerbate what's trying to be accomplished here? What further would have to be done? I
apologize. I am not familiar with the federal government's big push. And as it relates to 10 versus 15%, is that for, I would have to do some more research in order to respond to your question.
Okay, I would request that maybe you do that, because it is an issue right now. Whether or not that will get approved is unknown at this particular point, but it is something that's on the horizon. And I would also add up something that isn't often spoke of, but in the budget that was just approved in Sacramento, many millions of dollars were set aside for the purpose of establishing, further than what's been done so far, in hydrogen refueling facilities. And I just make mention of it because that will be the ultimate fuel that we used because of the torque value that hydrogen provides. Caltrans, for example, is using an experimental locomotive that's using hydrogen right now. Just if you're not aware, I thought I'd pass that on for you. And so I think hydrogen is going to be the future. Budweiser just led a contract for 800 hydrogen-powered tractors as opposed to diesel. So I make mention of that as well. I do believe it is the coming thing, and it just, as the argument is, it needs to meet that critical mass. Once it meets that critical mass, it'll begin to take off. And the advantage, of course, to hydrogen is not only because it's non-polluting, but the other advantage is that you can refuel and mimic what you're doing today with both diesel and gasoline. So you don't have to worry about a fast charger that you might accomplish 20-25 minutes with 80% recharge. You're going to be able to fill up your tank and move on. And the hydrogen that's being produced today is being done in a green manner, so that the energy is being offset in a green way. So I think, again, it has the potential to be the ultimate fuel that will replace diesel and have the least impact overall as it finally meets all these requirements.
Thank you. Do I see any other discussion, any public speakers on this item? None? Do I have a motion to approve this item, A7?
So moved. Second.
Second. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Director Wolf?
Aye.
Hartman?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Bennett?
Aye.
Mosby?
Aye.
Murillo?
Aye.
Patino?
Aye.
Richardson?
Aye.
Williams? And Lizalde.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Do I have a motion to approve the remainder of administrative items? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? None. Thank you. Okay, going on to item number 5, public comment. Do we have any public comment speakers? I see none. We'll go to item 6, Director's Report.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you. I have one item that I'd like to brief your board on today, and it relates to the settlement that we were able to reach with the Wine Institute. This item came before your board in closed session at your March 13th meeting due to a potential threat of litigation from the Wine Institute. Back in August of 2017, the Wine Institute issued or submitted an appeal to a permit to the hearing board that the Air District issued to Central Coast Wine Services, challenging the achieved in practice best available control technology that was issued for the proposed increase of wine production at the Santa Maria facility. This was a third-party appeal, and actually the Central Coast Wine Services accepted the permit and intends to voluntarily apply the BAC technology to all of the tanks being used at the facility. The case was fully briefed and originally scheduled to go before our hearing board on May 2nd. At the request of both parties, the hearing board meeting was continued to June 6 to allow for settlement discussions. So the second hearing was June 6 was the date. We started settlement discussions back in November of 2017, but they really didn't get fruitful until just a few days before the May 5th public or hearing board meeting. On June 5th, just one day before our hearing board date, we were able to reach the settlement agreement with the Wine Institute. And one thing that was real important about that settlement, in addition to reaching a settlement with the Wine Institute, we were also able to have a new permit submitted by Central Coast Wine Services. Both of those were required in order for the settlement to be finalized. It was very close. We were up at the office very late trying to get everything resolved before the 9:30 a.m. hearing board meeting. The settlement agreement maintains integrity of our best available control technology determination, but it clarifies the application of this technology to what is actually occurring here locally at the CCWS facility. It's limited to indoor closed-top tanks, wine fermentation tanks, that are 3,000 gallons or less in size. 30,000. That's the second time I did that. I did that when I was talking to the hearing board as well. 30,000. Gallons or size or less. As part of the settlement agreement, I already mentioned their submittal of the application. So this is considered a backed, achieved in practice with a class and category that reflects what has been in operations at CCWS facility in Santa Maria for many years. With this settlement, the threat of litigation has been eliminated. In addition, the settlement also included a clause that restricts any challenge from the Wine Institute or its members on the revised permit with CCWS. On June 6, the hearing board took action and approved the Wine Institute's request for the withdrawal of the permit appeal. So this is now a closed matter. I really wanted to bring it to your attention to recognize the cooperation and willingness of the Wine Institute to sit down and resolve this issue with the Air District outside of going before the hearing board, and also CCWS. They had to take really quick action in order for us to get their permit application in place and have the permit issued on June 5th, in the evening of June 5th, just hours before the hearing board was scheduled to meet. So I really want to recognize, and I do appreciate all of their hard work. We are glad that we've been able to reach this agreement, and with the fact that we did not have to proceed to the hearing board or have any potential litigation from the Wine Institute that could have resulted after the hearing board took action. Lastly, I just wanted to indicate that all of the information that was generated for this, all of the briefs, all of the correspondence, the administrative record is available and is on our website. We have a separate section that relates to prior hearing board agendas as well as winery operations. So all that information is available. If you have any questions, definitely reach out and I can help assist you in finding that information. And that concludes my report.
Right. Any questions for the director? I just want to say thank you for you and your staff for doing that in that litigation, so on getting it done and pushing it through. Thank you all.
All right, thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of work. We had engineering staff, Mike Goldman, Dave Harris. Dave Harris now has the Harris Memorandum. It's been referenced often in the briefs from both parties. There was a lot of late night oil that was being burned, so I do definitely want to recognize my staff as well.
Okay, thank you. No other discussion on that topic. We're moving on to item number 7, discussion items. Madam Clerk.
Discussion item number 1 is to authorize the chair to execute a memorandum of agreement with the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation for the district to contribute $35,000 to the 2018 Vessel Speed Reduction Incentive Program planned for July 1st to November 15th, 2018.
All right, Mary Bird, Community Program Supervisor, and Tim Mitro, Air Quality Engineer, both with the T Division, will be presenting today on the 2018 VSR program. Also here today, but not presenting, is Lindsay Marks. She's a Resources Protection Specialist and a new Sea Grant Fellow at Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. She will also be helping implement this year's program. And I believe she's over there. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate that. So you've likely seen the press release that was issued on Tuesday of this week. Today's presentation, both Mary and Tim will provide you more background information on the changes that are associated with the 2018 program that will enhance participation and recognition of the shipping companies. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Lizalde and members of the board. We're going to talk a little bit about what's new and special about this year's program, and then we're going to ask for you to authorize the signing of the Memorandum of Agreement with the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. So in the past, NOAA's Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary has issued whale advisory zones calling on ships to slow to 10 knots or less. They have been portions of the channel and portions of the VSR season when they've been effective. This year, for the first time, NOAA's whale advisory zone applies to the entire channel and to the entire VSR season, so it's completely consistent with our program. This has been also true in the Bay Area. The whale advisory zones and the VSR zones are consistent. Another first this year is this is the first time we can promise that there will be a 2019 program. There will be a program the following year. This is because the state settlement monies that the Ventura Air District has accessed will apply to 2019 as well as 2018, and we have received a 2-year grant from the Volcano Foundation. This is also the first year we've set the target speed at 10 knots. We've had good participation when we've had a 10-knot bonus and have set the target at 12 knots. We have found continuing emission reductions between 12 and 10. And so for consistency with the whale advisories as well as for the extra emission reductions, we set the target at 10 this year. This is also the first year we've taken a fleet approach. So I'm going to turn this over to Tim, who's going to talk to you a little more about the details.
Thanks, Mary. So, all right. So this year, we're proud to report that we have close to $300,000 for incentives and admin and recognition costs for the companies. You can see all the contributions from our partners listed below, and the majority of that money is earmarked for incentives in the Santa Barbara Channel region. So there will be actually a little bit less funding available for the Bay Area region. We'll still be performing emission calculations at the end of the season, and those costs will be split between the air districts, and they'll cost approximately $30,000. Oops. So let's take a look at the VSR zones. You can see the Santa Barbara Channel region map on the screen. On the right side is in the purple circles is the existing 40 nautical mile vessel speed reduction zones for the ports of Los Angeles and ports of Long Beach. And our Santa Barbara Channel region VSR zones are what's shown in green. You got the northern approach that goes through the Santa Barbara Channel, and then also the western approach, which goes south of the islands. And these are the same zones that we've had in our program for the last 2 years. Then we're looking at the Bay Area region map and their VSR zones. They have a few different routes, the northern route, the western route, and the southern route that all merge together to eventually funnel the ships on under the Golden Gate Bridge and into the port of Oakland and other ports in the Bay Area region. And these two are the same VSR zones as we've had last year in the program. Oops. So as Mary mentioned, we're looking to take a fleet approach rather than a per transit approach when giving out the incentives. So each company will receive a single fleet success rate score based on the percent of distance traveled in the VSR zones by all of the company's ships at 10 knots or less. And so you can see some of the corresponding criteria listed underneath, such as this program is only going to be applicable for container ships and the roll-on, roll-off vessels, as these ships are typically the fastest, and slowing them down to 10 knots provides both air pollution emission reductions and whale-safe benefits. So the incentives will start in the Santa Barbara Channel region at 10% and will increase progressively as the companies commit more of their transits to go at 10 knots or less. With all the criteria in mind, the expected incentive range is going to be around $2,000 to $35,000 per company, depending on how many ships they can slow down to that 10-knot target. So just to give an example of a few of the scenarios that could happen for the large fleets, Evergreen was one of the participating companies in the last few years of our program. And if they, say, for example, had 100 transits go through the entire Santa Barbara Channel region during the season, If they slow down 60 of those transits to 10 knots or less, they would receive the gold incentive and the appropriate incentive funding to go along with that award. Gold is quite good, but in our example, yeah, we also have Mediterranean Shipping Company. If they have going 90 transits out of the 100 at 10 knots or less, they would get the Sapphire Award and more incentive funding at the end of the season.
So looking ahead, we're going to continue to expand the recognition element. This is a picture of 10 of the 11 shipping companies from our 2017 program at our March 1st recognition event at the Port of Los Angeles. We will want to do more recognition, and we're very excited this year with the different levels of recognition that we can provide more recognition for the companies that have made the greatest commitments. We're also going to continue with the fleet approach. There may need to be some adjustments after we learn how we did in this year into the next year's program, and we're going to continue to work with NOAA on harmonizing with whale advisory zones. So this is the board action we're asking for today. This money was budgeted in the current fiscal year, and we're asking you to authorize the chair to execute an agreement with the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation to make this funding possible. Any questions?
Director Hartman.
Thank you. First, I heard about this on the radio while I was driving in this morning, so that's really great. But it raises the question, there's not much that general public can do except appreciate. How do you reach out to the various shippers? What kind of program, and how does your recognition, I mean, who all do they want to be appreciated by?
Well, we have quite a list of partners. So we include 4 national marine sanctuaries, 3 air districts, and we now have 4 nonprofit foundations involved. So that starts off the recognition with a large group. And we're also working with the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation on the Recognition Act, the Blue Whales and Blue Skies legislative effort. And all of these things can be working towards more recognition. And I think that the companies have been very interested in participating, and we reached out to them. When we send the press release, and I want to recognize Liz Hoffman, our public information officer, we have this list she's been maintaining of shipping industry publications. So it's already been posted online in Bunker Spot, Bunker and Fuel, you know, some of these so the idea is they're seeing this publicity about the program beforehand, so they know they will get it on the other side. And we've had PR representatives from the shipping companies contact us to get photos and issue them with their own press releases, so we know that is a very meaningful part of the program to them. We're hoping they all go for Sapphire.
Thank you. Any other discussions? Director Wolf.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to thank you guys. Staff has done an incredible job from the inception of this program, where there was just it seemed like a small amount of money to start this incentive program to where we are right now, and the inclusion of different foundations. I think it's incredible what you've done, and I really like this incentive program too. So congratulations and thank you.
Director Adams.
Yeah, I said this the first time we heard it, and I probably should just shut up and let it go, but I'm incapable of doing that, as y'all know. You know, there's just no wonder to me. It's actually a wonder that you don't have more companies signed up, because what you're doing is you're limiting the number of berths on cargo ships worldwide by slowing these things down. So these guys are all going to end up making more money in the end, because there's less container space to move stuff from one side of an ocean to another, because you slowed down every ship that does slow down. And so, you know, those berths are going to go for more money. So we probably shouldn't even be paying these guys, but we are covering them for their delivery dates and stuff, you know, they've got an excuse why they can't get there any faster, because, you know, in theory, somebody can know how fast a ship can get from one place to the other, and then these guys are telling their clients, you know, I can't get there any faster, I got to slow down. So, you know, I think there's a cost to everything that gets shipped worldwide, because you know, there's a ripple effect that goes out after all of these slowdowns, and yeah, maybe there's other good reasons to slow down, and these other, like the Bay Area, I don't know why they're slowing down in that Bay Area slowdown, and I don't know why they slowed them down in the LA area south of here. So maybe there's other good reasons to slow them down too, but understand that there's a cost to every consumer, probably worldwide, because return trips are going slower too. So,
go ahead, Director.
I was there at the inception of this program, and I found that the enthusiasm by the folks that participated and started it, and Mary, especially you've done a wonderful job with it. And I'd like to remind Peter that the reason for these slowdowns is because our greatest source of pollution in Santa Barbara County is shipping. And by those folks slowing down those ships, it's less pollutants for us. That's the only control we have of that. We do everything we can on the land side to reduce pollution, and it still doesn't benefit us the way slowing down the ships does. And a beneficial side to that is the whale strikes. And you said there has been no whale strikes in the channel this year. Did you say that, Mary?
I don't believe there have been any strikes in the channel, but I did just see a story about a blue whale washed ashore in Point Reyes.
Oh yeah, but the whale strikes have been reduced, which is really beneficial also. So I want to congratulate you for the program and thank you for the presentation. And I know that 35 or 300 grand for a shipping company, for even one shipping company, is nothing. So, but it's a wonder how they're cooperating, you know. And so again, congratulations,
Director Williams.
I know this is rare, but Director Richardson just said everything I was planning on saying. Okay. So I don't need to say anything.
Now, is there any public comment on this item at all? None? Do we need a motion to execute the memorandum of agreement? Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't see the red light. Director Mosby.
Yeah, in thinking about what Supervisor Adam was saying there, I can get his picture that potentially, and it's something we need to watch, are the ships slowing down, therefore they're running more ships? Because we have the same amount of product coming in, it's taking longer to come in, are they running ships? So in reality, are we maybe getting the same? I mean, it's something to keep an eye on and see. I get what you're getting. There's an equation here. The amount of product that's coming in, we're not getting less product delivered. So if it's taking longer to get here, are they just running more ships? So, you know, go along with this, but I think it's important we keep an eye on something like that it doesn't. You push over here, therefore it bubbles up over there.
And that seems like something we could probably keep an eye on as far as the total number of ships that transit through the Santa Barbara Channel. Tim's looking at the data regularly, so that could be something that we add as a baseline going forward.
And I'm sure there's a natural growth already, but I'm just thinking, like you say, you know, you're squeezing the balloon, it's going to go up.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, did I understand that Maersk, the Danish ship line, I have to throw that in.
It always comes back to
hey, listen.
to Copenhagen for you, doesn't it?
We're going to give you the most shameless politician award if you're not careful.
Okay, let's have some order here.
Wait, didn't they agree to adding another ship in this chain because of the slowdown?
Not that I understand, but it's interesting you mentioned Maersk because they are the largest container shipping company in the world, and we've been working closely with them for every single year of our program, and they are one of the shipping companies we've already heard from with some questions about how it's going to work this year as they get ready to sign up. Yeah. So,
thank you.
Thank you. I see no more speakers. Do I hear a motion to execute memorandum of agreement?
Move
Second.
staff.
Okay. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
I had a motion by Director Wolf, seconded by Director Hartman. Is that okay?
Yes.
So we've asked for a roll call vote. Director Wolf?
Aye.
Hartman? Aye. Adam?
Aye.
Bennett?
Aye.
Mosby?
Aye.
Murillo?
Aye.
Patino?
Aye.
Richardson?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
And Vice Chair Lizalde.
Aye.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Moving on to item number 2.
Item number 2 is to consider district grants for community air protection as follows. A, receive a report on California Assembly Bill 617, the California Air Resources Board's Community Air Protection Program, and the district's efforts to implement the provisions of the bill that apply to our region. And B, approval resolution resulting in the following actions. First, authorize the district's participation in CARB's Community Air Protection Program. And second, delegate authority to the Air Pollution Control Officer to enter into the following agreements with CARB. The first is grant agreement for the Carl Moyer Memorial Air Quality Standards Attainment Program Community Air Protection Funds. And the second is grant agreement for the Community Air Protection Program.
This is the last agenda item today. It's a presentation on the implementation of AB 617. This has got a lot of attention statewide. It's a pretty significant piece of legislation that the air districts in particular are taking on. As we were talking earlier, it's focused primarily on disadvantaged communities. So if you were to be in the Bay Area, San Joaquin Valley, or down in South Coast, the level of funding, the level of community awareness is at a much higher level than what we're seeing here. But it is still a lot of work, and today Molly Pearson will be providing a presentation on the outreach efforts that we've been doing as far as implementing this and our next steps associated with not only the grant program, but of the, some of the other specific projects that we're required to implement based on the legislation. One last thing before I hand over the baton. At the legislative level this year, there's been still ongoing conversations about this piece of legislation. This is one rare moment when it was approved and there was actually funding to assist local air districts to move forward with its implementation. They only awarded funds for the first year of implementation, and the conversation currently in the legislation is to expand funding so it can provide further assistance to air districts beyond just the first year of implementation. So, Molly, we'll continue. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Vice Chair Lizalde and members of the board, I'm here to talk to you about district grants for community air protection. There's 12 slides, and I'm happy to answer questions during or after the presentation. This project has been a fast-paced team effort, and I'd like to acknowledge staff for pitching in to make it all come together. Some of them are here: Jim Fredrickson, Mary Bird, Liz Hoffman, Tim Mitro, Alex Economou, and Liz Zavala, who's back managing things back at the office. So the picture here shows one of the bus ads that we developed for this program, and today I'll be talking about how we're implementing Assembly Bill 617 here in Santa Barbara County. I'll discuss our new grant program for community air protection, the outreach we've done in the community to fulfill grant requirements, and the input we received from community members and groups. Then I'll go over the recommendation for this item. So as a reminder from briefings you already received earlier this year, Assembly Bill 617 is a very important piece of legislation from 2017. It's designed to reduce exposure to air pollution in the communities that are impacted the most. One of the key tasks for the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, is to identify and select the first round of communities to develop emission reduction plans and expanded community air monitoring. These are the communities with the highest pollution burden, and CARB staff expects about 10 will be selected. They will go through a selection process again in 2019 and annually thereafter. District staff will monitor the process and consider whether any Santa Barbara communities should be recommended for future funding cycles. The state has identified funds to jumpstart this program through community air protection grant projects that follow the Carl Moyer grant program guidelines. Moyer projects are focused on replacing diesel equipment with cleaner technologies. The district is allocated $655,000 for this program, and in order to receive the funding, the district must conduct outreach to community members, groups, and organizations. Other aspects of 617 include a new statewide emissions reporting system for criteria and toxic pollutants. CARB has already conducted workshops for this effort and plans to adopt a reporting regulation later this year. District staff have already participated in calls and meetings related to this effort with a goal of avoiding double reporting and also retaining the district's discretion to assess emissions based on our local information. The bill requires that air districts evaluate the control technology requirements that are applied locally and determine whether rule revisions are necessary to meet best available retrofit control technology, or BARCT, requirements. A BARCT implementation schedule is required by January of 2019, and our staff will be presenting to your board on this requirement later this year. The BARCT requirements must be implemented by December of 2023. And lastly, AB 617 also increased the maximum penalty amounts for air district violations and added an annual CPI adjustment to those amounts. So in preparation for the grant program, district staff evaluated the pollution burden in Santa Barbara County communities, and we identified priority populations for some targeted outreach. I'll discuss that process more in the next slide. The grant program requires the district to prioritize emission reductions in those communities that are most impacted by pollution and to focus on vehicles and equipment that actually operate in those areas. The program also prioritizes zero-emission vehicles and infrastructure whenever feasible. In order to receive the funds, the district is required to hold these public meetings, conduct outreach, and seek input from local residents and groups on the community needs and the potential projects. After seeking input from the community, the district will issue a call for projects that will request specific proposals and the information needed to determine whether these projects will qualify for funding under the guidelines. Once the submittals are reviewed and allowable funding levels are calculated, the district will submit a project list to CARB in order to receive the funds. Each project funded through this program will follow the district's established grant process, whereby a standard grant agreement is reviewed by County Counsel, Risk, and Auditor, and is executed by the Air Pollution Control Officer. So this map shows the regions in Santa Barbara County that are identified as low-income communities according to Assembly Bill 1550. These are the areas that can receive grant funds. In order to focus our outreach efforts, staff examined multiple data sources and tools such as Cal EnviroScreen 3.0, EJ Screen, which is an EPA tool, and local reports such as SBCAG's Regional Transportation Plan and the Santa Barbara County Poverty Report. All these tools and documents pointed to populations in Guadalupe, Santa Maria, Lompoc, and the lower east portion of the city of Santa Barbara as being the most impacted populations. Although the funds can be spent anywhere on the 1550 regions on this map, we focused our outreach efforts in the more populated areas on the map in order to identify projects to benefit our target communities. We kicked off this outreach campaign in mid-April with a news release, seeking community input on local projects to improve air quality. We introduced a web page with a link to some community air questions, and we also scheduled our participation at several key events within those target areas I mentioned to maximize engagement with local residents and groups. We developed some bus ads that were installed in all the buses in the Colt, SMAT, and Guadalupe Flyer service areas, since those routes were all within our target communities. Throughout this process, we've had meetings and discussions with a variety of community members and groups regarding their air quality concerns and potential projects we could fund. This includes city and school district representatives, transit operators, waste collection companies, and groups such as Guadalupe Lions, Railroad Square, and Milpas Community Association. In order to reach people in our target communities, we participated in several community events, including Marion Medical Center Earth Day, Santa Barbara Eastside Disaster Readiness Fair, the Santa Maria Elks Rodeo Parade Street Fair, Cottage Hospital Earth Day, Santa Barbara Earth Day, Lompoc Spring Fest, and Guadalupe Earth Day. At all these events, we invited people in our community excuse me, we invited people to fill out our community air questions and also took the opportunity to discuss other air quality concerns such as wildfires and smoke. At each of the events, we arranged to have a Spanish language interpreter available, which was very helpful. Here are the questions. The community air questions were designed to be fairly simple and quick to fill out. They include basic questions about air quality and also request input on the types of grant projects that community members prefer. They ask about other air quality concerns and include a space to sign up to receive more information or notices. We've received approximately 500 responses to the community air questions. About 300 of those responses were from individuals living or working in our target areas of Guadalupe, Santa Maria, Lompoc, and City of Santa Barbara's Lower East Side. The questionnaire is still available online. Some of the top air pollution concerns expressed by people who filled out our survey were kids with asthma at 92%, exhaust from trucks and buses at 85%, wildfires at 74%, and near freeway impacts at 63%. Other concerns that folks expressed were leaf blowers, automobile exhaust, cigarette smoke, pesticide exposure, marijuana smoke, and odors from growing operations, and smoke from controlled burns. On the types of grant projects that community members wanted to see, the highest ranking was heavy-duty vehicles or semi-trucks. School buses were also ranked high. The other project types, such as construction equipment, zero-emission vehicles, and infrastructure, and farm equipment also received some level of support. In particular, farm equipment was highly supported by people in Guadalupe and Santa Maria. Based on the feedback we received from these communities and the eligible project types that AB 617 allows us to fund, the district will solicit heavy-duty diesel replacement projects within those target areas, such as school buses, other heavy-duty vehicles, farm equipment, construction equipment, and zero-emission vehicles. So the grant program I just went through represents the majority of that funding that the district expects to receive through this community air protection program. However, funds have also been set aside to assist air districts in implementing other portions of the legislation I talked about, such as working with CARB on the emissions reporting database and working to implement the best available retrofit control technology requirements locally. The district has been allocated $74,432 for this additional effort to be funded through a separate CARB grant with its own terms and reporting requirements. So the district is well situated to enter into these grant agreements with CARB to accept community air protection funds. A majority of the funds will be invested in projects that will benefit residents in low-income areas of the county that experience the most air pollution. Staff recommends that your board approve the resolution authorizing the district's community air protection program and the receipt of $655,000 in grant money, as well as a separate $74,432 grant to support implementation activities related to 617. Staff also recommends delegation of authority to the Air Pollution Control Officer to sign these grant agreements with the California Air Resources Board for community air protection grants. And thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Discussion, directors? Any comment? Any public speakers? Oh. Director Williams.
Sounds like you have some good targets. If it's underutilized for any reason, I'd suggest just simply revamping some of the. You obviously are already going to handle some of the school district fleets in those areas, but and Director Lizalde did not prompt me to say this, but the other option, if it's undersubscribed, is simply to take some of the fleets in those jurisdictions and switch over to zero-emission vehicles, in those jurisdictions. I assume you'll be able to use all the funds because it's not that a terribly large amount. But if you're not, I would suggest that as a plan B.
Director Hartman?
Thank you. I just had a question. Is the philosophy to spread the money around in 3 communities, or are you going to try to make a measurable difference in a single community?
Yeah, I can answer that one. Yeah, we would do it like we do our standard Moyer grants, where we really do try to spread it around in those communities, but benefit the areas where there's actually a population that will, see the impact of that. The benefit of that, but definitely try to spread it around the county.
Okay. I see no other comment. We approve the resolutions individually or all items below 2B?
It would be taken as one motion.
As is one motion.
Correct.
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve resulting in the following actions?
Second.
And the recommendation.
Staff recommendation.
Staff recommendation. I hear a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
All right, Director Wolf? Aye. Hartman? Aye. Adam? Aye. Bennett? Aye. Mosby? Aye. Murillo? Aye. Patino? Aye. Richardson? Aye. Williams?
Aye.
And Vice Chair Lizalde?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you, staff. Okay, moving on to item 8, announcements. Any announcements? Directors? None? Moving on to item 9, adjournment. The next Air Pollution Control Board meeting will be August 16, 2018 at 1 p.m. County Administration Building, Santa Barbara. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? I hear a second. Mr. Adams, second. Yes. Meeting adjourned.